The door at the end of the hallway had not been opened in 26 months. Not for cleaning, not for airing out. Not even on the nights when Bennett Hale stood at the top of the stairs after putting his son to bed and felt the particular pull of that closed door the way you feel weather before it arrives, a pressure in the chest, a shift in the air. He left it closed. Every time. He came home on a Wednesday evening in November. Bag of groceries in one hand, his son Theo's lunchbox in the other, and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The hallway light was on. He never left it on. He set everything down. He went upstairs slowly. The hallway runner was the same one that had been there for 6 years, worn at the center strip from use. The reading chair outside the closed door still had, draped over its arm, a cream-colored throw blanket that had not been touched in 26 months. The door at the end of the hall was not locked anymore. It was open. Just ajar. 3 inches of darkness, and then, past that, a faint quality of light different from the hallway. Warmer, softer, the particular light of a room where something had recently been tended. Bennett stood in the hallway for a very long time. He was a structural engineer by training, a man who built his understanding of the world around load and stress and what holds and what doesn't. He understood that things left unattended long enough became unsound. He knew this about buildings. He had refused, for 26 months, to apply the same logic to a room at the end of his own hallway. He pushed the door open. The room was clean, not emptied. Nothing was gone. The watercolor prints on the walls, the small cedar vanity against the east wall, the quilt folded at the foot of the bed in the particular tri-fold that his wife had always used, which he had never known how to replicate and had therefore never tried. The books on the shelf above the window, undisturbed in their order. But the mold that had been colonizing the corner near the closet door. He had glimpsed it once, 2 winters ago, through a crack in the seal. Was gone. The curtains were fresh. The single vase on the vanity held white ranunculus. His wife had kept white ranunculus in that vase every week she was alive. He stood in the doorway and could not speak and could not move and could not understand how either of those things was possible. Downstairs, the back door opened softly. Then footsteps on the porch. Then the quiet sound of a van engine turning over in the driveway. She had not meant to take the West Haven job. Her manager had flagged it on a Thursday, a 4-bedroom house in West Haven, Connecticut. Deep clean plus bi-weekly contract. Start date flexible. He had sent it because she was the only operator in his network reliable enough for a private residential contract in that zip code, where the clients expected a certain discretion and a certain quality. Nora Parish had looked at the number on the contract and said yes before she finished reading the terms. That was how she made decisions now. Not weighing. Just calculating necessity and responding. She had been making decisions this way for 2 years, since the car accident that killed her husband Dale. A November night, wet roads, a truck running a light. And left her with a 9-year-old daughter named Bex, a mortgage she had not been managing alone, and a grief she had no time to sit with because the bills arrived whether or not she was ready for them. She was 36. She had a cleaning company she had built from a single client list into an actual operation. 4 staff, a van, contracts across Fairfield County. She was proud of it in the functional way she was proud of everything now. Quietly, without ceremony, because ceremony cost time she didn't have. What she did not have was a cushion. Dale's life insurance had paid the hospital bills and 8 months of mortgage, and then it was gone. Every month since had been the specific math of a person who understood exactly how much buffer she had and exactly how fast it could disappear. Bex was with Nora's mother in Bridgeport during Nora's longer days. This was an arrangement that worked, and that Nora told herself she was at peace with. Which was mostly true, except at 9 o'clock at night when she drove home through the dark and thought about what her daughter had eaten for dinner and whether she'd finished her reading. She arrived in West Haven on a Monday morning in late October. Van stocked, thermos full. The house on Craigmore Road was a 1930s craftsman on a tree lot. Generous and considered. The kind of house that had been built for permanence. A boy's bicycle was parked against the porch rail. An engineering textbook sat on the porch steps, left out and slightly damp. A man opened the door. Tall, mid-40s, with the look of someone who had been athletic and was still technically functional, but had been running on reduced maintenance for longer than was ideal. He had kind eyes and a contained expression. "Nora Parish," he said. "Yes." He stepped back from the door. "One thing before we start," he said. "There's a room at the end of the upstairs hall. Don't go in it. Don't go near it." "Understood," she said. He nodded once, satisfied, and let her in. He had no idea how little that rule was going to hold. She read houses the way other people read faces. It was not a skill she had cultivated. It had come from years of walking into spaces that people had stopped seeing, the way you stop seeing your own reflection. Nora understood. From the specific weight of a room's silence, from the arrangement of objects that had not been moved in too long, from the ratio of functional space to abandoned space, how a household was faring emotionally. The Hale house told its story in clear, patient language. Downstairs, functioning. The kitchen was clean in the maintained minimum way of a single parent keeping a child's world orderly. Dishes done, floors swept. A boy's drawings on the refrigerator door, taped slightly crooked. A Kindle on the kitchen counter with a cracked screen that had been cracked long enough that the crack had become part of the object. A coffee maker with one mug beside it, always one. The living room had two separate lives in it. A child's zone near the window. Legos, a half-assembled model airplane, a paperback with a dragon on the cover, and an adult zone near the fireplace that had the specific stillness of a space no longer fully used. A leather chair with an indentation from years of the same person sitting in it. A side table with a coaster and nothing on the coaster. Upstairs. Held. The word came to her on the first day as she worked from the front room's back. Not abandoned. Held. As if the house was keeping the upper floor in suspension, waiting for instruction. The closed door at the end of the hall had a different energy than the others. She could feel it the way you feel a room that has been locked during a gathering. The specific temperature of exclusion. She did not approach it on the first day. On the second day, working the hallway, she noticed the smell. Mold had a vocabulary. This was old mold, deep, settled, the organic signature of an enclosed space that had been developing a problem for a long time without intervention. She had encountered it in foreclosures, in flooded basements, in vacation properties sealed through wet seasons. She crouched at the base of the door. The gap underneath was less than an inch. She looked through it. What she saw stopped her breathing for a moment. The far wall was dark with bloom. A canvas on the wall, large, framed, had a spreading shadow across its lower half. And on the floor near the baseboards, the corner of a woven rug had gone black. She stood up. She walked back downstairs and worked the bathroom and said nothing. But she thought about that canvas for the rest of the day, and into the night and through the morning that followed. He was 9 years old, and he appeared in the kitchen doorway at 3:45 on a Wednesday, like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Backpack still on, left shoe untied, looking at Nora with a frank appraisal of a child who has developed his own intake process for new adults. His name was Theo. He had his father's build and an expression that suggested he had been processing a large amount of adult information for a long time and had simply gotten efficient at it. "Are you the cleaning lady?" he asked. "I run a cleaning company," Nora said. "Today I'm the one cleaning, yes." He considered this distinction seriously. "My dad says you can't go in Mom's room." "He told me." "Did he tell you why?" "No," Nora said. "He didn't." Theo set his backpack on a chair, not the floor, the chair, with the precise habit of a boy who had been told many times, and opened the refrigerator with the thoughtful expression of someone conducting an audit. "He can't go in either," Theo said, his back still to her. "He tried once, about a year ago. He got to the door, and then he sat down on the floor in the hall and just sat there for a long time." Theo closed the refrigerator with a juice box. He turned around. "I watched from the top of the stairs. He didn't know." Nora was quiet. "The room is getting bad," Theo said. "I know because I went in." "When?" 4 months ago. I have a key. Mom gave it to me." He said this simply, without drama. "She said the room was mine too, that I should go in whenever I wanted to remember her. So I do. Sometimes." He sat down at the kitchen table and opened his juice box with the same serious attention he gave everything. "The painting is the problem," he said. "She was working on it before she got sick, and she finished it right before she died. It's the big one on the north wall. The mold is on it now." He looked at Nora directly. "Dad doesn't know. He's never gone in far enough to see the wall. He just stood at the door that one time." Nora sat down across from him. "Theo," she said carefully, "why are you telling me this?" The boy looked at her with the particular expression of a child who has thought something through very thoroughly and arrived at a conclusion. "Because you noticed the smell," he said. "I saw you crouching at the door. And because I think you're the kind of person who does something about things." He reached into his jacket pocket and set a small brass key on the table between them. She told herself she wasn't going to use the key. Friday evening, Saturday, through most of Sunday, during which she took Bex to the park in Bridgeport and pushed her on the swings and watched her daughter's face go bright with the clean joy of motion and thought about a canvas being destroyed by mold in a locked room in West Haven. She was not an art restorer. She was not a conservator. She owned cleaning supplies and a dehumidifier and an antifungal treatment kit she used for water damage remediation jobs. But she knew what mold did to canvas on a timeline. She had seen it in flood-damaged homes. She knew the difference between a problem that could be stopped and a problem that had already become permanent. And she knew, with the specific certainty of someone who had stood at that door and looked through the gap, that the window on the first category was not wide. Sunday night at 11, she called her mother and asked if Bex could stay Monday. Her mother said yes, without questions. At 2 a.m, Nora Parish drove to West Haven. She parked on the street instead of the driveway. She let herself in through the back door with the contractor key Bennett had given her for the bi-weekly arrangement. She stood in the dark kitchen for a moment and listened to the house breathe. Then she went upstairs. At the door, she stopped. She thought about the rule. She thought about the canvas. She thought about a 9-year-old boy who had given her a key because He believed she was the kind of person who did something about things. She put the key in the lock. The smell hit her fully when the door opened. She clicked on her work light and saw the room complete for the first time. It was worse than the gap had suggested, and better than her worst estimate. The mold on the north wall was extensive, but had not yet reached the structural plaster. The canvas, large, perhaps 3 by 5 feet, had a spreading bloom in the lower right quadrant. The rug near the baseboards was unsalvageable. The curtains had yellowed and stiffened. But the room itself, the bones of it, the cedar vanity, the watercolor prints, the books on the shelf, was intact. She could save this. She set down her kit. She looked at the painting before she began. It was a seascape. The Connecticut shoreline, she thought, from a specific angle she recognized as the bluffs above Bluff Point State Park. Early morning light, the water still, a single lighthouse on the eastern edge. And standing on the shore, rendered in a few precise brush strokes that somehow conveyed everything. A man and a small boy, shoulder to shoulder, looking at the water. Nora stood in front of it for a long moment. Then she rolled up her sleeves and began. She worked until the light changed outside. The mold on the north wall she treated in 3 passes. Antifungal solution applied carefully. Worked in sections from the outside edges inward, the technique she used for water-damaged walls that had been colonized before anyone noticed. She replaced the window seal with weather strip from her kit, where the original had cracked and allowed condensation to feed the problem. She set the dehumidifier in the corner and ran it for 2 hours before adjusting the setting for maintenance level. The canvas she treated with the softest bristle brush she owned and the gentlest dilution she trusted. She was not a conservator, and she knew it. The affected area would need professional assessment and almost certainly targeted in-painting to restore fully. But she could stop the spread tonight. She could prevent the point of no return. She left the painting where it was. She left every object exactly as it had been. The rug she rolled and set in the hallway, it could not be saved. But removing it was right. The curtains she replaced from the linen closet she'd found during her first week, which held a spare set in the same cream color, folded as if Claire Hale had bought them, knowing they might be needed. At 4:45, she looked at the vanity. The bud vase was there, empty and clean. No dead flowers, which meant Theo had cleared them on one of his visits. She had stopped at an all-night grocery on the way and bought white ranunculus on an instinct she couldn't fully explain. Only that the vase looked like it should have something in it, and white ranunculus felt right. Later, days later, she would find out from Bennett that his wife had kept white ranunculus in that vase every single week she was alive, without exception, and that no one outside the family could have known that. She put the flowers in the vase. She stood in the doorway of the finished room as the sky outside the window went from black to gray to the particular pale gold of a November dawn. And she looked at what she had done. And she felt the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who has completed a necessary thing and does not yet know whether it will be received as the gift it was intended as, or the trespass it technically was. She locked the door behind her. She left the key on the kitchen counter. She drove home to Bridgeport as the sun came up over the highway, and she did not sleep. And she waited. Her phone rang at 7:43. She almost didn't answer. The number was Bennett's cell. She had it from the contract paperwork. She sat with the buzzing phone in her hand in her kitchen in Bridgeport and looked at Bex eating toast at the table and breathed in and answered. "You went in?" he said. "Yes." Silence. Not angry silence, something else. A silence with texture. How bad was the painting? He asked. His voice was steady in the precise way of someone holding something with considerable effort. The lower right quadrant was affected. 6 to 8 inches of active bloom. I stopped the progression. Nora paused. It needs a professional conservator for the affected area, but it won't spread further. He didn't speak for a moment. The flowers, he said. I made a judgment call. If it was wrong, She kept white ranunculus in that vase, he said. His voice broke on the last word, briefly, and then held. Every week, How did you? I didn't know, Nora said. It just seemed like the right thing. He was quiet again. Can you come this afternoon? He said finally. Not to clean, I need to talk to you. She came at 2. He was on the porch when she pulled in, sitting on the top step with a coffee mug he wasn't drinking from, looking at the yard. The silver maple in the front had dropped most of its leaves. The engineering textbook was still on the step below him. She sat down beside him without being invited, which felt correct. She died of an aggressive cancer, he said without looking up. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. Theo was 6 when she was diagnosed, 7 when she died. He turned the mug slowly in his hands. The room. I locked it the day after the funeral because I couldn't figure out what else to do with it. I told myself I'd open it when I was ready. He paused. I didn't understand that closing it was making ready impossible. Nora said nothing. She had found, in 2 years of grief, that the most useful thing you could offer someone who was telling the truth was the space to keep telling it. The painting, he said. She was working on it the whole time she was sick. She finished it 2 weeks before she died. She told me it was for Theo. He looked up at the maple. I never went far enough into the room to see the wall. I got to the doorway once and couldn't go further. A pause. My son watched me from the stairs. I know, Nora said gently. He told me. Bennett looked at her. My son told you, he said slowly, and something in his expression shifted, like a man discovering that the people he loved had been quietly preparing something for him without his knowledge. She hadn't meant to find it. On the following Wednesday, back in the room on a proper cleaning contract now, Bennett had asked her to continue after their porch conversation, and she had said yes. She was dusting the shelf above the writing desk when a slim, hardcover notebook slid sideways and fell open. Brown cloth cover, the kind from an art supply store. It had fallen to a page near the back. Nora steadied it without reading. But her eyes caught 3 lines before she could redirect them. The handwriting was rounded and deliberate, a teacher's handwriting, she thought, someone used to being read. The 3 lines said, for T on his 15th birthday, for T on his 18th, for the day he finds the right person and needs to know his mother saw it in him already. Nora set the notebook upright and finished the shelf and did not open it again. That evening she told Bennett it was there. He went still in the way she had come to recognize. The specific stillness of a man processing information that costs him something. She was writing letters, he said. For Theo, for different ages. He looked at the table. She told me she was doing it. I knew about it. He was quiet for a moment. I couldn't read it after she died. I've tried twice. I get to the 2nd page and I have to stop. Do you want to read it now? Nora asked. A long pause. No, he said. But I think I need to. He looked at her with the expression she had seen in many forms over the past weeks. not asking for rescue, just acknowledging a hard thing plainly. Would you— This is a strange thing to ask. Would you sit somewhere in the house while I do? I don't need company. I just don't want the house to be empty. Nora looked at him. She thought about the specific thing he was asking, which was not for presence as comfort, but for presence as witness. The way people sometimes need to know that the hard thing they are doing is being registered somewhere, by someone, even at a distance. I'll be in the kitchen, she said. Take whatever time you need. He went upstairs. She heard the door at the end of the halls open. She made coffee she didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table and listened to the house hold its breath. And when she heard the quiet, precise sound of a man crying alone in a room he had not entered in 26 months, she did not go up, and she did not leave. She simply stayed. She arrived on a Thursday in a Lexus that she parked in the center of the driveway in a way that suggested she had never once considered whether she might be blocking someone. Bennett's older sister, Nora Hale Price, was 47, impeccably dressed in the specific Greenwich way that required money to maintain and effort to make look effortless. She had the Hale jaw and none of the Hale quietness. She came through the front door and while Nora was working the upstairs hallway and announced her presence to the house before she'd fully crossed the threshold. Bennett, your neighbor says there's been a strange car in the driveway before dawn. We need to talk about your security. Bennett's voice, from his home office downstairs, contained the specific compression of a man managing a sibling with long practice. That was my cleaning contractor. It's fine, Renata. At 2 a.m? Yes. Nora finished what she was doing and came downstairs. Renata assessed her with the quick, complete efficiency of a woman who has decided someone's category before they've finished crossing the room. You're the cleaning woman. I run the cleaning company, Nora said. Today, I'm the one cleaning. The same distinction she'd given Theo. Theo had found it interesting. Renata found it irritating. You went into Claire's room, Renata said. Not a question. Yes. Bennett specifically told you. The room had significant mold damage. Nora said. The painting on the north wall was being actively destroyed. I stopped the progression. Renata looked at her brother. Something moved across her face that was not concern for the painting. Something quicker and more practical than that. I've been saying for 1.5 years that this house is too much for one person, Renata said, shifting slightly toward Bennett with the smoothness of someone changing positions in an argument. A house this size, the upkeep, the emotional, Renata. Claire's things especially. There are decisions that need to be made about the estate. Some of her work has value. The painting alone could— Renata. His voice was quiet and very final. She stopped. In the silence, she recalibrated visibly. Her expression rearranged itself into something more carefully modulated, concern, or a precise imitation of it. I'm only saying what needs to be said, she said softer. I'm only trying to help you move forward. I know, Bennett said. Thank you for coming. The dismissal was gentle and absolute, and Renata heard it clearly. She looked at Nora once more. A measuring look, not hostile. More like the look a person gives something that has appeared in a space they had been managing uncontested. She left. Nora watched the Lexus back out of the driveway and made a decision, privately, to find out exactly what estate decisions Nora Hale Price had been trying to make. She found it in the notebook. Not by reading it. She had not opened the notebook since the day it fell, But on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after Renata's visit, Nora was cleaning the shelf above the writing desk and noticed that the notebook had been moved. It was no longer between the art supply catalog and the slim volume of Mary Oliver poems where it had sat for weeks. It was on the wrong shelf, second instead of third, set with its spine facing in rather than out. Someone had moved it and not returned it to its position. Nora photographed the shelf. Then she found Bennett in his office. "Has anyone been in the room since we last spoke?" she asked. He looked up. "No. Why?" She showed him the photograph, then the current state of the shelf. His expression changed slowly. "Renata has a key," he said. "She's had one for years. Claire gave it to her when we first moved in." He stood up. "When was she last here?" "I don't know. But it wasn't like that when I cleaned on Friday." He went upstairs. He was in the room for 4 minutes. When he came back down, his face had the controlled stillness of a man who was angry in a very quiet, very specific way. "There are 2 pages at the back of the notebook," he said. "I read the whole thing after you sat with me that night. I know every page." He looked at Nora. "There are 2 pages at the back that were not in the notebook when I read it. They've been added, inserted under the back cover, typed, not Claire's handwriting." Nora went still. "What do they say?" "They're formatted to look like a handwritten note, like Claire's voice, approximately, saying that she wanted her work to go to the family trust, that she wanted the painting sold and the proceeds divided." He paused. "Claire never wrote anything like that. Everything in her actual handwriting, every real entry, says the opposite. The painting was for Theo. She was explicit." "Your sister knows what the real notebook says," Nora said. "She was in the room when Claire told Theo the painting was his." Bennett said. "She was there." His jaw was tight. "She's been trying to get me to sell the house for 18 months. The trust is structured so that if the house sells, certain assets that Claire specifically directed to Theo revert to a discretionary pool that Renata has partial authority over." He looked at Nora with the expression of a man arriving, late and furiously, at a truth that had been sitting in plain sight. "She's been waiting for me to be ready to let go," he said. "And she's been preparing for when I was." She came to Nora's van on a Wednesday. Nora was loading up after her shift. It was the van she always drove, a gray Sienna that had seen better years but ran well, the back organized with the particular efficiency of someone for whom disorder in a work vehicle was a professional problem. Theo appeared at the passenger window, backpack on, in his coat. "Aunt Renata took something from the room," he said. Nora stopped what she was doing. "I saw her," he said. 2 Saturdays ago. Dad was at a project site. I was supposed to be at soccer, but practice was canceled. I came in the back and she was coming down the stairs and she had Mom's notebook in her hand." He looked at Nora steadily. "I didn't say anything to her. I just watched. She didn't see me." "Did she put the notebook back?" "She took it to the kitchen table and she had her laptop and she typed something for a long time. And then she went back upstairs." He paused. "She was up there for about 15 minutes. Then she left." Nora looked at him. 9 years old, with his father's careful way of holding information until he knew what to do with it. "Theo, why didn't you tell your dad?" "Because he just started going back into the room," he said simply. "He just started being okay enough to do that. And I didn't want to put something else on him until I understood what she did." He looked at her with the directness she had come to expect from him. I understand now. She added fake pages to make it look like Mom wanted the painting sold. You read the notebook? I read it a long time ago, he said. Mom told me I could. She said there was a section for me and a section for Dad, and I could read all of it whenever I was ready. He paused. She never wrote anything about the painting going to the trust. She wrote that it was mine. She wrote it 3 times in different entries. Nora was quiet for a moment. If your father takes the notebook to an attorney, she said carefully, the inserted pages will be identifiable. Paper stock, printer toner, the way the text is formatted, it won't match the rest. Theo nodded. I know. I took a photograph of the real last page before she changed it, and I took a photograph of the inserted pages. He reached into his jacket and held out his phone, where 2 photos were already on the screen. I've had them for 2 weeks. He had been waiting, Nora understood, for the right adult to give them to. The attorney's name was Patricia Osei, and she had been Claire Hale's estate attorney since before the diagnosis. Bennett called her the morning after Theo showed him the photographs. Nora was not in the house for that call. She'd gone home, given Bennett the space to handle his family without a near stranger in the room. But he called her afterward and told her what Patricia Osei had said. First, the inserted pages were immediately identifiable as fraudulent based on paper stock and printer toner, inconsistent with the notebook's original pages. She had referred the matter to a forensic document examiner that afternoon. Second, the estate structure Renata had described, the discretionary pool, the reversion of assets upon sale of the house, was not accurate. Renata had been misrepresenting the terms of the trust to Bennett for 18 months. The trust was not structured to give Renata authority over Theo's inheritance under any sale condition. She had no claim on the painting under any legitimate reading of Claire's estate documents. Third, and this was the part Bennett told Nora slowly, as if making sure he had it right, Claire had, 14 months before her death, updated her estate documents with a specific provision that Patricia Osei described as unusual but unambiguous. In the event of any disputed claim against Theo's inheritance, specifically the painting, the matter was to be resolved by a named executor whose identity Claire had chosen and documented. That executor was not Bennett. It was not Renata. It was not a family member. It was Patricia Osei herself, who had been instructed to act in Theo's interest independently of any family influence. She knew, Bennett said. He meant Claire. She knew Renata would do something like this. Nora was quiet on the other end of the phone. She protected Theo before she died, she said. She protected all of us, he said. She just did it quietly, the way she did everything important. He paused. She wrote something in the notebook about it, in the real pages. She wrote, I don't want my son to spend his life fighting for what's his. I've arranged it so he won't have to. Nora sat with that for a moment. She thought about a woman she had never met who had, in the last months of her life, while she was painting seascapes and writing letters to her son at 15 and 18, and on the day he found the right person, also been arranging the legal architecture of her family's safety with the quiet precision of someone who knew exactly what was coming and refused to leave the people she loved unprotected. She had rebuilt her room, and Claire had, in her own way, already rebuilt everything else. Renata did not go quietly. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon, again the center of the driveway Lexus, again the front door opened without knocking. But this time something in her bearing was different. She had been informed by Patricia Osei's office that the estate matter was under review and that certain documents were being examined. She understood what that meant. Bennett was in the living room when she came in. Theo was at the kitchen table, doing homework, in the direct sightline of the hallway. Nora was in the kitchen. She had not been asked to be there. Bennett had called her that morning and said simply, "Renata is coming today." And Nora had said, "Do you want me there?" And he had said yes. She had not asked him to explain why. Renata saw her immediately. The calculation behind her eyes was rapid and complete. "This is a family conversation," Renata said. "Nora stays," Bennett said. A pause. Renata reset her approach. "Whatever Patricia has told you," she began. "She told me the truth," Bennett said, "which is different from what you've been telling me." Renata's expression moved through three things in 4 seconds. She chose the one that looked most like dignity. "I was trying to protect the family," she said. "This house is a burden. Claire's things are a burden. You've been stuck, Bennett, for over 2 years, because you can't let go of." "Theo," Bennett said without raising his voice, "can you go upstairs for a few minutes?" Theo closed his textbook, looked at his aunt once with an expression that communicated a complete absence of confusion about what was happening, and went upstairs. When his footsteps reached the top, Bennett turned back to his sister. "You were in Claire's room," he said. "You tampered with something she wrote for our son. You've been lying to me about the estate terms for 18 months. And the only reason I can identify for all of it is that you wanted access to assets that Claire specifically directed away from you." Renata was quiet. "She knew you would do this," Bennett said. It was not accusing. It was sad, in a way that was harder to absorb than anger would have been. She knew, and she made sure you couldn't. Renata stood in the living room of her late sister-in-law's house and had nothing to put in the space where a rebuttal should have been. She left without the conversation she had come for. She did not come back. She lost a contract in December. Not the West Haven one, a commercial account in Stamford that had been her most reliable large-format client for 3 years, a property management group that renewed annually without discussion. They did not renew. The email was professional and brief. They were going in a different direction with their facility services. She found out 2 days later, through a mutual industry contact, that someone had flagged her company to the property group as unreliable, specifically citing an incident involving unauthorized entry into a client's private space. Renata Hale Price had 3 properties under management by that company. Nora sat with this information at her kitchen table in Bridgeport for a long evening. The Stamford contract had been 17% of her annual revenue. Losing it was not catastrophic in the short term. In the medium term, it required adjustment. She made the adjustment quietly, recalculating her operating costs, identifying the accounts she could expand. She did not tell Bennett. Not tell. He found out anyway, because the property management contact told the same mutual source, who mentioned it to someone in West Haven's professional network, who mentioned it to a structural engineer they used for commercial work. Bennett called her on a Thursday night. "Renata went after your business," he said, not a question. "It was one contract," Nora said. "I've handled it." "Nora!" "Bennett, it's handled." She paused. "I'm not telling you this so you'll fix it. I'm telling you because you asked, and I won't lie to you. But it's my business, and I've handled it." Silence on the line. "You should have told me," he said. "Maybe." She looked at the window over her sink, the dark street outside, the ordinary November night. but you were already dealing with Renata and the estate and Theo, and I wasn't going to add to that. Another silence. Longer this time. You do that, he said. Do what? Handle things without asking for help. Even when asking for help would be reasonable. Nora was quiet. Yes, she said. I do. I do it too, he said. I've been doing it for 2.5 years. A pause. It doesn't actually make things easier. It just makes them more solitary. She didn't answer immediately. Outside, a car went by on the wet street. No, she said finally. It doesn't. Nora's daughter came to West Haven exactly once before things changed. It was a Saturday in December when Nora had a full-day job there, a pre-holiday deep clean that Bennett had requested. And her mother was unavailable, and Bex was out of school. Bex was 9. With Dale's dark eyes and Nora's habit of making direct observations without softening them first, she sat at the kitchen table with a book while Nora worked. Theo came home from a half-day at noon, found another child in his kitchen, assessed her with his standard intake expression, and sat down across from her. Within 11 minutes, they were playing chess on a board Theo had brought from his room. With the focused intensity of 2 children who have discovered an evenly matched opponent and intend to do something about it. Nora worked. Bennett came in from his office at 1 o'clock to make lunch and stopped in the kitchen doorway when he saw the 2 children at the table, heads bent over the board. He looked at Nora. She was at the counter and she met his look, and whatever was in both their faces in that moment was not something either of them tried to name. At 3 o'clock, Bex looked up from the board and said, to no one in particular, in the way she said things, as if reporting a finding, "This house feels like it's getting better." Theo considered this. "It is," he said. "It wasn't before." Bex looked at her mother. "Mom's good at making things better." "I know," Theo said. He moved a piece. "That's why I gave her the key." Nora did not look up from what she was doing, but her hands paused for a moment on the surface she was cleaning. Bennett looked at his son for a long moment. Then he looked at Nora again. He had been meaning to say something for several weeks. She had understood this without being told, the way you understand weather before it arrives. He was a man who moved carefully toward important things, who tested the ground before committing his weight, who had learned through hard experience the cost of structures that weren't sound before you built on them. She could wait. She had been waiting for 2 years for things that mattered. She was very good at it, but when she looked up and found him still watching her, something in his expression told her the waiting part was nearly over. The forensic examination of the notebook took 3 weeks. The finding was unambiguous. The final 2 pages had been inserted using paper stock sourced from a printer different from any in the Hale household. The typeface was a digital approximation of a handwriting font. Convincing at a glance, detectable under examination. The inserted pages had been placed with care, but not with the expertise of someone who understood document forensics. Patricia Osei filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association regarding Renata's misrepresentation of the estate terms. She also referred the document tampering to the state attorney's office, noting that the modification had been made to a legal estate document in a manner consistent with fraud. Renata hired an attorney. The property management company, upon being made aware of the context of Renata's complaint about Nora's business, quietly reinstated the Stamford contract. No explanation was given. The email simply said they had reconsidered and hoped to continue the relationship. Nora read the email twice. Then she forwarded it to her accountant and got back to work. What happened to Renata in the following months was not dramatic from the outside. There was no public moment, no confrontation witnessed by a room full of people. There was a letter from the Bar Association. There was a settlement agreement with the estate that required her to formally relinquish any claim she had asserted or implied against Theo's inheritance. There was the specific, lasting consequence of being known within the community of people who knew her as someone who had tampered with a dead woman's notebook to take a painting from a child. In certain communities, that knowledge travels far and stays long. Bennett told Nora about the settlement on a Tuesday evening, plainly, without satisfaction. He was not a man who found other people's pain satisfying, even people who had earned it. "Theo gets to keep his painting," he said. "Yes," Nora said. That's what Claire wanted. That's what Claire made sure would happen. He was quiet for a moment. "She was always 3 steps ahead of everyone," he said. And there was something in his voice that was grief and gratitude and love all at once, indistinguishable from each other. The conservator finished her work in January. Her name was Delia Park, and she had been restoring paintings for 22 years, mostly institutional work, museums, estate collections, university holdings. She had come recommended by a colleague of Bennett's, and she had driven out to West Haven, examined the painting, and told him the damage was more contained than feared. The affected area could be fully restored. "You would not be able to see it," she said, "when I'm done." She was right. Nora was not in the house the day the conservator finished. She heard about it from Theo, who texted her a photograph. The painting in full, clean, and complete. Every inch of it as Claire had painted it. The Connecticut shoreline at early morning, the still water, the lighthouse on the eastern edge, and on the shore, the 2 figures, a man and a small boy, shoulder to shoulder, looking at something the painting didn't show. Nora looked at the photograph for a long time. She thought about a woman who had finished this painting 2 weeks before she died and known, with the clarity that sometimes comes at the end of things, exactly who it was for and why. She texted back, "It's beautiful." Theo replied, "Dad cried. But the good kind, I think." Then, "He wants to know if you'll come see it in person, when it's hung." She came on a Saturday afternoon. The painting was on the north wall where Claire had hung it originally, not repositioned, not rearranged, exactly where it had been. The room was clean and aired, and the ranunculus in the bud vase were fresh. Theo stood beside her and looked at the painting with the expression of someone seeing something they had been worried about for a long time and finding it safe. "She would have liked knowing you saved it," he said. Nora looked at the 2 figures on the shore, at the way the boy's shoulder leaned almost imperceptibly toward the man beside him. "I think she already knew someone would," Nora said. "They were in the kitchen." This was where most of the true things seemed to happen in that house. The table, the ordinary light, the background sound of a house living rather than holding its breath. Theo was at his grandmother's for the weekend. Bex was with Nora's mother in Bridgeport. The house had the specific quiet of a Saturday, with no obligations pulling either direction. Bennett had made dinner. He was a competent cook in the way of people who had learned out of necessity and developed actual standards in the process. There was pasta and a salad and a bottle of wine that he had clearly thought about in advance. Nora had noticed the wine and made a decision not to comment on it. After dinner, he turned his glass slowly on the table, the way he did when he was deciding whether to say the thing he was deciding whether to say. "I know what I want to ask you," he said. "I've known for a while. I've been waiting until I was sure I was asking from the right place." Nora waited. "Not from loneliness," he said. Not from gratitude, though I am grateful. That's real. Not from Theo needing something, though he does. He looked at her. From the thing that happens when you're in the same room with someone, and you can tell exactly who they are, and you understand that who they are is exactly what you want to be close to. The kitchen was very quiet. "I'm asking slowly," he said. "I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just telling you what I want to ask, so you know." He paused. Is there space for that?" Nora looked at him across the table. At the man who had sat on his porch step in November and told the truth about a door he hadn't been able to open. Who had asked her to sit in the house while he read a notebook because he didn't want to do a hard thing in an empty space. "Yes," she said. "There's space for that." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Neither of them said anything else for a while, and it was the right kind of silence. Spring came late that year. In March, the Connecticut shoreline was still gray and cold, the water the color of old pewter, the beach grasses bent flat by the wind off the sound. But by April, the light had changed. That specific April light that makes everything look like it's leaning toward something. Nora brought Bex to West Haven on a Sunday in April. Not as a contractor, not with the van and the supplies, just herself and her daughter for the afternoon. Bex and Theo resumed their chess rivalry with the focused intensity of children who have been keeping a mental score across several months. They were evenly matched and both aware of it, which meant the games were long and conducted in total silence, broken periodically by very decisive piece movements. Nora and Bennett sat on the back porch. The yard was beginning to come back. The silver maple had new growth at its tips. The perennials Claire had planted along the back fence were coming up from the ground with the quiet insistence of things that knew where they were supposed to be. "Theo wants to go to Bluff Point this summer," Bennett said. "The place Claire painted." "I know. He mentioned it." "He wants us all to go." A pause. If you'd want to." Nora looked at the yard, at the maple, at the fence, at the back of the house with its windows and its rooms, and the particular weight of a life being rebuilt not from scratch, but from what remained. She thought about a woman she had never met who had painted a shoreline in her last months and placed 2 figures on it and left instructions for her son and legal architecture, for his protection and flowers she favored in a vase that someone who didn't know her had somehow filled with the right thing. She thought about the specific kind of faith that required. "Yes," she said, "I'd want to." Bennett reached over and took her hand, the same way he had in February, without ceremony, as if it were already ordinary. Which, she thought, was exactly the right way. The painting is still on the north wall of the room at the end of the hall. The door stays open now. Not all the way. Bennett tends to leave it half open, the way you leave something you've stopped being afraid of, but haven't yet made entirely ordinary. Theo goes in and out as he pleases. Sometimes Nora finds him in there doing homework on the writing desk, which his mother used, which fits him in the way of things that were made before you arrived, but made for exactly who you are. Bex asked once, about 6 months in, why the lady in the painting was for Theo. Nora told her, because his mother wanted him to know she saw where he would go, that she painted the place where she imagined him standing, someday, when he was older, looking at the water and knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Bex thought about this for a moment. "Do you think she knew a lady would come fix the room?" she asked. "I think she hoped someone would," Nora said. "How?" Nora thought about white ranunculus in a vase, about a notebook written for a boy at 15, at 18, at the day he found the right person, about a legal document drawn up in the last months of a life, arranged to protect a child from people who would use grief as a doorway. She did everything she could to make sure the things she loved would be taken care of, Nora said. And then she trusted. Bex nodded, apparently satisfied. There is a kind of love that keeps working after the person who built it is gone. That shows up in notebooks and legal documents and paintings finished in the last weeks of a life. And vases that hold the right flower when someone who never knew you somehow chooses it anyway. That kind of love does not require the person to still be present. It just requires someone, arriving later, to recognize it and continue it. Nora was not the ending of Claire Hale's story. She was the part that proved the story had been built to last. That's the only kind of story worth telling. And if any part of it found you tonight, hold on to it. The room you've been afraid to open is not empty. It's waiting for you to be ready. Thank you for watching. Leave us a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear this tonight, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. We'll see you there. And just like that, the story is over. Hey, if you're still here with us right now, at this very moment, I just want to take a breath and say something real to you. You didn't stay this long by accident. Something in this story touched you. Maybe it was Nora walking into a locked room in the middle of the night. Not because anyone asked her to, but because she recognized something dying that didn't have to. Maybe it was a 9-year-old boy quietly collecting evidence for 2 weeks because he was waiting for the right adult to trust. Or maybe it was just the idea that someone who loved her family could arrange, even from the end of her life, for them to be protected and found and cared for. Here's what I keep coming back to after a story like this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present. Not the locked door, not the grief you've been carrying, not the room you haven't been able to open. Just this moment, what it needs, what you can actually do." And Epictetus said something even simpler. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Nora didn't have a plan when she walked into that room at 2 in the morning. She had a work light, a soft bristle brush, and the specific conviction of someone who cannot walk past a thing that is quietly being destroyed. That's not heroism. That's just showing up for what's in front of you. The door you've been standing outside of, whatever yours is not asking you to be ready. It's just asking you to take one step closer than you did yesterday. If this story meant something to you tonight, hit that like button right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe so you never miss what we put out next. Because we have more stories coming that will stay with you the same way this one did. Drop your city in the comments. We genuinely love knowing where in the world you're watching from. We'll see you in the next one. Before you go, here's an important note for everyone still with us. This story is a work of fiction, created entirely for entertainment, emotional storytelling, and personal reflection. All characters in this video, including Nora Parish, Bennett Hale, Theo Hale, Claire Hale, Renata Hale Price, Bex Parish, Patricia Osei, and Delia Park, are completely fictional and do not represent any real individuals, living or deceased. All events, locations, legal proceedings, estate situations, and circumstances depicted in this story are products of creative imagination. Any resemblance to real people, real families, or actual events is entirely coincidental and unintentional. This content is not intended to make factual claims, legal accusations, or real-world allegations of any kind. The themes explored, including grief, family betrayal, healing, and love after loss, are dramatized narratives designed to inspire reflection, empathy, and meaningful conversation. This channel is committed to original, responsible storytelling. Thank you for watching with an open heart.